Welcome to another episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. My name is Stephen Clark and I'm joined by a co-host in the studio, Nick Ponty. Bringing you all the latest news, guys, keeping you up to date with the property market. Welcome to another episode of the Scottish Property Podcast. I'm delighted to be joined with Marcus DiRollo from Gilson Gray today. How are you, Marcus?
I'm great, thanks. And thanks for inviting me along. It's been good.
Great stuff. So we've invited you in to do a wee market update today. So Stephen, what are we talking about today?
God knows. You know I come here for my educational monthly update and what happens, Nick.
Well, it's looking back on the month of March because there's been a heck of a lot of stuff happening. I mean, we've got quite a list here to be getting on with.
We thought these market updates would be boring, but there's something like drastically changes every month. We have loads of things to speak about.
Well, I just think it's just in the kind of global economy, we're at a kind of a point where there's definitely a transition. There's a lot of stuff happening, which will eventually filter down to us as, you know, small-time buy-to-let property investors in Scotland. So that whole thing's interesting as well. But just to kind of kick us off, looking back on to start off talking about the budget. So we obviously had our spring budget there, the UK budget. Now, there wasn't really a lot specifically related to property. We knew about the corporation tax increase, which a lot of property investors will be affected by because obviously that's going up from 19% to 25%. But I think you have to be over a certain, I think it's over £50,000 profit. So that will certainly have an effect. And did you see anything else?
Yeah,
in the budget?
the pension was phenomenal. I thought it was the best news I've ever had in a mini budget or a budget for a long, long time. So the pension increase, the pension contributions went from £40,000 to £60,000, but they've also scrapped what I think is huge. Is a scrapped the lifetime allowance. So it was something like 1,073,000, I think, was your personal lifetime allowance. There was talks of them putting it to 1.8 million, but they absolutely scrapped it altogether. So if you're investing into a SAS pension and buying commercial property, this opens the doors up to grow your portfolio.
This will suit the big money bags like yourself, mate, won't it? Marcus, does that get affected your £1 million pension pot?
Well, hopefully. No, it's interesting because obviously building up a property portfolio over a period of time. I've got a couple of flats that I do on a short term basis, and just in terms of the things that you get hit with in that, you know, you've got the new licensing's coming in, you've got a number of things that you've got to consider now. And corporation tax increases are another part of that. So, it's interesting to see how this year will go, especially with these aspects. And I think, I don't know if it's helped or not.
Something that's not directly related to us as landlords and property investors, but they extended the support for they extended the energy price cap.
Yeah.
So for us, obviously renting out to our tenants and stuff like that's obviously a bit of help to them. You know, that because a lot of people are struggling with the cost of living and just the inflation data that was out just recently as well. We've certainly not got a handle on inflation. That's gone up again, and they put a lot of that down to food inflation. Food costs going up 18% or something like that. So, you know, I think that's important to always look out. You know, if tenants are struggling, then there is obviously support there as well. What do you guys do, Marcus, as a letting agent? Do you engage with tenants? How do you kind of deal with people when they're facing those difficult times and they're maybe struggling to pay the rent? Do you kind of...
Yeah, it's difficult. We have quite a settled portfolio, but there are people that are struggling. I think the biggest thing for us is just to try and communicate with them.
Yeah.
I think from the start of, you know, the pandemic and things, we went round and we tried to have conversations with our tenants, with our landlords, and just made it, you know, if someone's struggling, there's perhaps something that the landlord can do, maybe delay a payment or can discuss of ways in which just to ease the pressure on the tenants. I think, you know, on a couple of examples that we've had in that, we kind of are now in a phase where hopefully things are beginning to look a little bit better for individuals, and now they've maybe got, you know, if they've got slightly behind in the rent, there's been a wee bit of leeway with them, just trying to.
Well,
to
you
get that back.
say that things are looking a bit better, but obviously from the from the 1st of April, we're now allowed to increase our rents. So, you know, there was a rent freeze at 0% from this. I think it was the 6th of September. Scottish Government have now revised that and said that we are allowed to increase our rents by 3%, possibly up to 6%. You can apply to the Rent Office Scotland if you have significant increased costs, such as mortgage costs, insurance costs, all the rest of it. Have you had discussions with landlords about, you know, increasing rents, and what's the kind of general consensus now?
Yeah, I think anyone, you know, who has a mortgage on their property, you know, is, especially if it was an interest tracker, it's gone up, right? So someone who was maybe paying, you know, 2% is now up at, you know, double that. So it definitely has an effect. A lot of landlords that we find are kind of just almost like, right, you know, this is what the way it is. However, the 3% is something that they're keen to do, just to sort of claw back some of their costs, but they're also aware of the cost of living, you know, for their tenants, and effectively a lot of them would prefer, you know, the tenant stays in their property than can't afford it and falls back into arrears or something like that. So we have had these ongoing discussions, but I would say in general terms, unfortunately, it's the landlords that are taking, you know, we find that they're taking that hit, and there's not really much that they can essentially do.
Stephen Clark, are you putting your rents up
across the whole portfolio?
3% across
3% across the whole portfolio. I think it's just because the choice was taken away from us. If it wasn't taken away from us, then yeah, I think I've discussed it before in the podcast, how I'd never put my rents up. Like, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to that. If there's a tenant in the property and looking after the property, just let them settle. It's better than paying remarketing fees and a void period to rock the boat. But the fact that the power's been taken away from us, I think unfairly, then, you know, and you have to put...
Yeah, it seems disproportionate, doesn't it, with the social sector and the private sector. And I mean, most landlords are in that position, having said, you know, similar to yourself, you know, good tenants are great, but there's costs that's gone up, so they have to kind of gear up and take what's available to them.
I was looking at the house associations in Glasgow there, and they've published their rent increase figures, and across the board, I think the average was about 6 or 7%. You know, so like you say, it kind of seems a bit unfair, although obviously their argument is that social rents are obviously a lot lower to start with, and they're a not-for-profit apparently as well, so but we're just greedy landlords trying to capitalise, aren't we?
As your landlords, are you issuing the increases for your landlords under your agency as well?
So basically we've written out to landlords to actually recommend that they do take the 3% increase, and the reason being obviously just rising costs in general. I mean, I don't think things are going to come down this year anyway, so, you know, insurance, mortgage costs, maintenance, you know, getting tradesmen and repairs done in properties as well. So most have come back and said, yep, that's fine, we'll take that. Some have come back and actually said, how do we go about getting the 6%? Obviously, that's still a bit. I don't know if you've done any applications yet on the 6%.
We haven't. No, but we're the same as you. We're looking to advise all our landlords to increase the rents by 3%, which you're allowed. We haven't done much on the 6% at the moment. However, we're making them aware that's available to them.
There's a bit of extra paperwork to be done. You need to go on the Scottish Government website and fill out the form and all the rest of it. And
I'm pretty sure we can all justify a 6% increase in your costs.
Well, if you're sitting there and you've got a fixed rate mortgage coming to an end, you can certainly justify a 6% increase anyway. Do you know what I mean? And there'll be quite a few of them this year. A lot of people are going to get a shock when they start negotiating on those new.
We had a landlord recently. He kind of inherited the portfolio, and his mother had agreed an all-in rent, so a rent with utility bills as well.
Oh my!
So he was saying to me, he said, "What do I do?" I was like, "Well, what can you do?" So he's trying to advise them, what there is. So he could be a 6%. Could be a 6%,
and still be losing money.
And still be losing money. Exactly.
Yeah. Interestingly, I do have a couple of landlords that have come back and says no, that they're happy.
Yeah.
They obviously are fixed in for maybe they've just taken out a fixed rate like a year ago or something like that. They feel that they don't need to, and they're really taking the view of keep the tenant happy, keep them in there long term, make the tenant aware that they are not increasing the rent and they could do, so that the tenant feels valued as well.
Yeah.
So there is an argument for that as well, but I just can't see how, like you say, we've had our hands forced, because we don't know what they could come in with next.
Well, that was my point, and actually the deciding factor in putting them all up across the board was if you sat put and you said, you know what, no, I'm not putting them, and then what happens if we're in this position in a year's time and you've not increased it by 3%, and then you go, oh, well, another 3%. So yes, it might be a menial amount you're raising the rent to, but you're going to lose out on that if you've not raised it this year, and then they've capped it again and you need to just raise it by 3% again. It was
a stat I saw. I was reading an article yesterday, and the stat was there's 365,000 homes in the UK that might become rental homes that might become unviable because by the end of the year, just because of rising mortgage costs and etc. And you're looking at there's a lack of supply at the moment. So where's that going to go? And obviously it's a UK issue, but it's a Scottish issue.
Oh, if you look at your average property in Edinburgh that you're buying in and that you're operating in, if you were to pay 6% ADS, buy it at market value, put on your deposit, you actually look at your mortgage costs based on the new interest rates and the rental income sticking the way it is right now. There's no money in it.
Yeah,
they just don't stack up.
That's right. My business partner Sam, he works alongside me at lettings, head of lettings at Gilson Gray, and he'd bought a property in Dundee, and Dundee's quite a sort of a good market, kind of low cost to entry, good rental yields, what have you. However, his interest rate was on a tracker, and he thought, look, this is just it's not worth my while for all the hassle.
And going back to that point that you made about those properties becoming unviable, that obviously causes landlords to exit the market, which we've talked about a lot in the podcast before. Now, interesting to see that Patrick Harvey did an interview there that came out, and he's basically said that no, there is no decrease in private rental stock. In fact, there is a small increase since the legislation came out. I can't get my head around that one.
I don't believe it, but unless he's got stats on the overall market in Scotland.
So where's I was like that as well. Where's he getting his figures from? So apparently this is according to the landlord registration, right?
Right.
But if you think about it, right, if you're selling a property as a landlord, you probably wouldn't go straight on to the landlord register and cancel your what do you call it? Registration number straight away. So that's going to take quite a long time, because 3 years I think you get on landlord registration. So that obviously they're just going to start dropping off as the properties get sold over time. You're not going to. It's not really something you would probably go on and do. A lot of people would probably just leave it. So I think those stats are really airy-fairy, to be honest with you.
I didn't believe them in the slightest either when you sent me, Nick, but having heard that justification, that probably makes sense on maybe why the data is
landlord registration figures are not decreasing. What have you found yourself, Marcus, through speaking to landlords? How many properties do you manage through there?
So I was just going to say, we manage around about 500, just over 500.
That's quite a decent amount. So out of that, have we seen any that are getting sold off?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, just going back to that point is, we traditionally, or sort of historically, have around about 25 to 35 of our property available at any one time, so around about 5-6%, something like that. Now, we just had our meeting yesterday and we've got 16. So,
there you go. That speaks volumes.
Exactly.
Without even having to go into the number crunching numbers, like just that on the surface.
And you've spoken about that before as well on the market updates recently in the last few months, that each property you submit onto the market gets 100 inquiries. Is yours stocked the same? That 16, would they get, how many inquiries for each one of them would come through?
Well, it's really interesting because I was looking at it yesterday, and you've got your 1 bedroom and your 2 bedroom flats. Now they when we're going to viewings, we open up viewing slots because, like, you know, there's so many inquiries that we have to sort of cut it down to a manageable amount a viewing. So the 1 bedrooms, the 2 bedrooms are absolutely flying. They're so oversubscribed for everything, you know, and tons of tenants. The bigger stuff and the high ticket sort of value stuff, especially in Edinburgh, is relatively, you know, normal, kind of slightly slow actually in comparison to everything else. So I would say the 1 and 2 bedrooms are, you know, flying off the shelf, and that's what most people have the budget to.
That's because the Scottish government are scaring away all the high earners for the higher taxes. That's why. That's why the higher stuff. Possibly. That's why the higher stuff's struggling. I just think, obviously, you know, we talk about it a lot. You know, obviously landlords selling off, overall negative impacts the whole sector, because ultimately, you know, rents are just rocketing out of control. And, you know, you can look at this both ways. You know, some landlords, I tell them that, you know, when we come to re-let their property after only being tenanted for 2 or 3 years, the rent's gone up in some places in Glasgow, £200, you know, in that short time. £300, or you could look at it and say, well, that's amazing, that's brilliant. But I don't think it is.
Yeah,
that can't continue.
I totally agree. I think it's actually had an adverse effect, because if you're saying, right, you can't increase rents, and you can't, you know, essentially get anyone out their property, then it's going to narrow the market. Any property that goes on the market is going to have, you know, a lot more tenants looking for it, and because of the demand, the rent goes up. So actually, everything that's coming to market, you know, even the 1 bedroom stuff in Edinburgh that was maybe a £750 to £850 rent, you know, you can ask £950, £1,000 for it. So actually, the stuff that's coming on the market is actually driving the price up.
Does the rents not need to go up then? Because like what we touched on there before about, you know, if surely the property market's propped up by the yields that you can get for purchasing a property, and if the interest rates are now gone up, the cost of buying it now with your additional dwelling supplement as well, does the yields not need to make sense for it to be a viable option? So does the rents not need to go up that extra few? The
government's agenda is to protect the tenants. It's not to protect the landlord's yields. Do you know what I mean? So like,
it's the property market in general though.
Well, yeah, but who's making the legislation? Who's passing the laws? Do you know what I mean? It's not the market. The market's getting suppressed by government intervention in a free market. But
that never ends well when people try to intervene in a free market.
Exactly, which is what we've been talking about all along.
I think you're right. I think their aim long term is to try and fill the housing shortage. So it's almost like, you know, the private renter sectors, you know, the easy targets. Let's get into them for it, and I think they're suffering the most. They've got the most legislation, the most constraints, and everything that's come out over it sounds pretty bleak, this, doesn't it? Everything that's come out over the last sort of 3 to 6 months is geared to to do that.
But my original point was that these crazy rents that are going out of control, you know, 10-15% year on year, that puts us under the spotlight even more, brings us into the media, brings us into attention, negative publicity, which I don't think is going to end well. It's going to end tighter rent controls, which is what the plan was anyway with the Housing 2040 strategy.
It's a long-term look as well, you know, because if you think, if all these people are going to exit the market, there's going to be less properties on the market, yes, for a rental, but there's also going to be more properties potentially for purchase. So what might that do? So if everyone sells, then it's going to flood the market in areas, and that's going to drive down the values of properties. So the outlook for the next year is going to be really interesting to see.
That's why I think it's such an interesting time.
Yeah.
It's like hugely pivotal, like in terms of.
Yeah, then the big players that are coming into this market though, like Lloyd's Banking Group are going to become one of the biggest landlords in the country with their build to rent schemes. So how do you think that's going to affect the market going forward and in the coming years with their strategies? Because the government seems to bail them out in every crisis. So
yeah, it's interesting. Even the build to rent scheme though, that's kind of gone a little bit cold, hasn't it? And it's starting to warm up a little bit. But I suppose there'll be an element that they're going to gear up on build to rent schemes as well. So they're probably thinking, with interest rates going up, let's just hold off a little bit on that. You've got high construction costs.
Yeah.
So materials as well have all been on at highest levels over the past recent times. So for that, I think it will be interesting to see how quickly that comes about. I mean,
well, you were talking about the build to rent there. That's interesting. That just jogged my memory there. On the 11th of March, there was an article to say that a £200 million flat development in Glasgow had been put on hold because the developer was basically scared away by the Scottish Government legislation on rent freeze and eviction bans.
Yeah.
So that's definitely driving away the investment. And this investment's coming from big, pension funds and institutional investment down in London and all that. Do you know what I mean? This is big stuff, big developments.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of them I've heard recently are, they're kind of in build to rent, but they're also into, maybe student accommodation or something. And, student accommodation looks like a much more solid, outlook. People are at one stage, were they not at Glasgow University told not to take up their course? Yeah. Because they can't. There's no housing for them. So so there's obviously a huge gap in the market for that sort of accommodation. So you can maybe see the shift from these big pension funds, to doing that because it's safer. They know the demand's there. So again, it'll be interesting to see as the year develops how that all shapes.
Next topic on the agenda, there's an article here that I found where DJ Alexander has brought out some research to say that there's been a 36% drop in LBTT, so the obviously Land Buildings Transaction Tax. Why I thought that this was in the first 2 months of the year, so January and February compared to the previous 2 months.
Yeah.
So what I thought was interesting there, and a wee kind of signal for the market, was that obviously there's not as many transactions going through, which is a kind of signal that the market's on the downslide. So the firm says that it's down 44% when compared to the last 2 months of 2022. A fall in 39.6 million. What they identified was, because I thought initially that it would really be the investor landlord market that would have got hit with the 6%, the increase in the ADS up to 6%, but they were actually saying it's actually the homeowner market that's been hit hardest in terms of the amount of tax they're bringing in. But they do bring up the 6% ADS as a.
Do you think that's just a blip on where from the mini budget in September, October, where we saw the market stall for a couple of months? Do you think that's just the lag effect of that?
I think it probably,
those transactions maybe going through in January, February.
And there's maybe a seasonal element.
They did say it could be seasonal as well, but
did they compare it to last year's January, February stats at all? No.
So they were comparing it to the final 2 months of the year. So, and they did say, there's a stat here, revenue from second home buyers, landlords and property investors who also pay a 6% premium on top of the standard LBTT fell by 5 million or 15%. So that kind of applies to us. But I just thought in terms of transactions, I did see another story that says number of transactions on the decrease as well. And it's interesting speaking to local estate agents as well. They seem to be getting they don't seem to be getting that much coming on.
Oh, yeah, less stock.
Less stock. So I guess we're just talking about kind of how that'll have an impact on house prices as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd spoken to a couple of our guys and a couple of other contacts, I know, and they were particularly quiet, sort of, January, February. Things seem to have been picking up in March, and seasonally, everyone wants to put their property on in spring, doesn't it? So they are the quiet months. But yeah, the transaction volume, I think, was definitely down.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about house prices then. Obviously, we kind of specialise in lettings, right? So sales is probably not our strong point, but we're obviously we're wanting to keep an eye on the market because we want to kind of see what areas are doing well, where the opportunity is, where potentially there could be deals to be done. So
you're going to bash Aberdeen, aren't you?
This is why I brought this in, because there's a cracking stat here for Aberdeen. So this is, and again, like we there's so much data out there, right? So every headline that you see in the newspapers, there's always a different data behind it. So you've got like Nationwide, you've got Halifax, you've got Rightmove. So this data here that I'm going to put in front of you is the Office National Statistics, ONS, which basically take from the Land Registry of Scotland, Registers of Scotland or something is what it's called, right? So headline statistics for January 2023. Bear in mind, these guys probably have the most accurate data, but it's the kind of data that lags because the house price sale needs to be registered before they can take it. And we know that by the time it goes through the solicitors and all the rest of it, there can be a delay in it, right? So the average price of property in Scotland was £185,016. The annual price change of a property in Scotland was 1%. So we're still going up, right? Property prices are still rising, but by 1%. Now, what's interesting is the peak house price increase was April last year at 13% year on year. So over the course of 12 months, 13% in April last year. Now, over the course of the last 12 months, 1%. That tells you a lot, right? The brakes are on.
Yeah.
Right? The monthly price change of property in Scotland was negative 0.5%. Monthly changes don't really matter too much, in my opinion, because they don't take as much data and they don't take the whole general trend into the equation. But I'm coming to Aberdeen here. I'm coming to it. Right, so I'll just give you a few cities, for example. Right, Marcus, obviously, you're in Edinburgh, city of Edinburgh, up 3.6% over the 12 months. Right. Get Glasgow. Hang on, wait till I get to my list. City of Glasgow up 3.5%, right? So we're doing better than the average 1% across the whole country. God, and all these guys invest in Aberdeen. You think this was like the place to be? Do you know what I mean?
Just looking at your statistics here, West Dunbartonshire up 11%. There's quite some good increases in.
You're trying to deflect here from the city of Aberdeen.
I'm trying to educate the listeners on where you should be maybe investing, or where the one that's got the best growth.
City of Aberdeen, negative 4.4%.
Was it the only negative in Scotland?
It isn't actually. There is one other negative, Argyll and Bute. But it pretty much is the only negative.
Jesus. it's just preparing for the upward trend. So my point is, I mean, obviously it just depends. It's property specific. It can change as well. Street by street, we know it can change too. Do you know what I mean? But if you're looking at this, right, and your values are still going down, in 2 years or 5 years' time, when you come to like refinance or remortgage, interest rates, have gone up, but your valuations have gone down. If I've got it for a 40% discount, then I've got enough buffer in there for it to go down a fair bit more before I'm starting to be bothered. You can't get nothing at market value. You've got to pay 10% over.
But you're getting a 40% discount, but then when you're revaluing, when you're refinancing at the start, you're obviously trying to pull as much money back out as possible.
Not necessarily. It depends on the strategy of the portfolio or the purchase. But yeah.
trying to pick holes in your strategy, mate.
Across the board, yeah, it's got to make sense. If you're buying at such a huge discount and it's dropping by a few percent a year.
I mean, listening to guys like Chris mentioned all that, rents are going up in Aberdeen.
Oh yeah, hugely.
And there's huge demand. So in terms of that, yes, I just feel like...
I think the government's probably stifling the growth in Aberdeen as well, because I think there's the windfall taxes on a lot of the oil companies. I hear the oil and gas industry is picking right back up, but not as much in the North Sea because there's huge taxes to pay for development in the North Sea. Yeah. So it's not helping the SNP government at all, for Aberdeen specifically. So
I suppose it's a worry as well for everyone in general. If you're an investor, if you're just if your house, last thing you want is a decrease in the value of your house, especially when you're mortgaged it. So yeah, it's a...
So just throw you another stat out there. So average prices obviously increased by 1% over the last 12 months, right? Taken up to January 2023. That's down from an increase of 5.1% in the 12 months leading up to December 2022. So just from the month of December to January, it's gone from 5% to 1%.
Is that?
I'm going to put you on the spot, right? We want some predictions here. What are we going to end the year on? House prices. I've said all along negative 10%.
Yeah, I'm still saying the positive.
Yeah, I would like to say it would remain positive.
Yeah.
I think there's obviously pockets in Scotland in general. There's obviously going to be pockets, and perhaps Edinburgh is also a market that's exactly. Remained pretty strong. I mean, some of the, and it also depends on what you're buying and what you're selling. If it's a family home, people are paying 20% over.
Well, let's just say average
Scotland.
Give me a figure, Marcus. We'll hold you to it.
I would like to say somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 5% or something.
Right.
Like
so
that.
we're going to go from 1% up to 5% when we're facing a banking crisis, the highest inflation we've had in 40 years. Stephen, give us a figure.
I'm going to agree with Marcus. Maybe not quite as high as 5, but I still think we're going to be in positive. I don't see it slowing down yet.
And it just purely down to supply and demand?
Supply and demand, it's there.
Right.
There's money in the economy, the banks are lending at the moment.
Yeah.
Until that changes, then I don't see us declining much. I think this statistic from your 13% down to 1% in the last kind of year, or even from 5 in December down to 1, and that's just the heat taken off the market. Probably the mini budget from October, the fallout from that.
Love the optimism, guys. Love
as
I
always.
Think as well, the mortgage, the mortgage products coming out, they aren't as high as what people thought. I think they're the fixed rates are coming down, so that could hopefully just hold the market optimistically.
Great to get your opinion. I love this stuff. I absolutely love it.
I shared my first deal last night on the network call, and I said I'd actually checked the mortgage because everyone was asking about what it was. And in 2006, when I bought my first flat, the mortgage was 5.09. So we're only going back to what it was 16, 17 years
ago. But what were house prices back then? Your average house prices, things have absolutely rocketed since, so that does make a difference.
On the affordability.
Yeah, it's getting a handle on inflation. I think that's the biggest thing over the next year.
Absolutely.
If we get a handle on inflation, utility costs, everything, food costs, fuel costs, these are the things that are obviously driving up inflation. And if we can get a handle on that, then hopefully it'll stabilise the market. I'm not an economist.
The OBR statistics came out of the budget there, and they said that inflation was going to go down to 2.9% or 2.7% by the end of the year, and we're going to avoid a recession. So everyone thought, that was pretty positive, which it is, but I just can't see it. I just cannot see that.
Negative Nick's thinking pessimistically.
Absolutely no way. Well, unless Trump gets into power and he can go and sort out the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Just to finish off with, guys, we can't finish up this market update without mentioning that we have a new First Minister in Scotland. So yesterday, Hamza Yousaf was declared the winner of the SNP leader and new First Minister. Have we got any thoughts on that? you know Hamza? You hang out with him much?
No. It's not a friend of mine, but I hear your Daily Record story that you're going to give us a
So I'm going to show you. This is really all you need to know about Hamza. If you're a kind of business owner, or you've got an interest in trying to, you know, an entrepreneur or something like that. Stephen, do you want to read out the headline?
I'll tax rich to help poor kids.
Right. Help the poor kids, absolutely, all for it. But, you know, taxing the rich, well, I wouldn't really put myself in the category of rich, but I think when Daily Record says rich, I think they kind of mean anybody with
middle class,
you know, okay, you know, a half a kind of bit ambition, maybe some, you know, people with small business as well. So I don't necessarily know if this is a good thing. Kate Forbes, who was one of the other front runners, I think she would have been much better, because she did say that she would have put the economy at the forefront, the whole, you know, getting Scotland back on track. I think she also, interestingly, you know, the Green Party has this whole agenda against, you know, private landlords, and basically wants this gone. It was interesting because of Kate Forbes' view on same-sex marriage, because she's a member of the Free Church, and that the Greens said that they would depart government if she won. So, you know, I was all for Kate,
Yeah.
basically. And Hamza's wanting to retain the Butte House agreement, which is the coalition government. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's possibly a bad thing for business, because he's basically said he's a socialist, and that's probably never really good for business. Marcus, you get any?
It seems like a bit of a sort of Robin Hood type headline there, but I don't know. I mean, obviously it's far too early to say. The guy's just in.
Yeah.
He'll have his own views, his own policies, and his own ideas of how he'll want to go ahead. And yeah, it remains to be seen, I suppose. And we'll hopefully know more in a few months' time.
They talk about taxing the rich and taxing, you know, big energy companies and all the rest of it, right? Which to a certain degree, you know, I do kind of agree with. But the problem with that is, if you're trying to get an economy back on track, you want to be attracting investment. You want to be attracting big companies.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's like Republic of Ireland. I think their corporation tax is like 12% or something like that. Mm-hmm. You've got big companies like Google and Facebook and all that setting up headquarters there. You know why? Obviously, it brings jobs, which is obviously good for us as well. Brings people.
Surely good for tax revenue as well.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that going down this route is just going to put us in a backward step. You know, so it'll. I mean, they've already scared away a lot of people who are earning higher tax because of the increase in income tax bans and rates and stuff like that. So, which is why you're seeing not many people wanting your high-end properties in Edinburgh.
Yeah, potentially. And the other thing is, a lot of them, going back to that point, a lot of the people who are in that are foreign. Mm-hmm. So they're coming in, you know, they're, you know, contractors or whatever, and they're looking for places, and they can afford to pay the high rents, and they seem to be the people that we're getting in as tenants for those particular properties. So
brilliant. Be interesting to see how it pans out with Hamza. So finishing up, do you want to give us a wee bit, just quickly, we should have done this at the start, but what do you do yourself at Gilson Gray, and how can you help people? Yeah,
I'm lettings director at Gilson Gray. So we're a multifaceted law firm, and yeah, we can help anyone from, you know, property in terms of purchasing, letting, financing. We also have, you know, a number of different facets from family law, commercial. So yeah, we're pretty well rounded in terms of advice and as a firm. So yeah, if you need any information, please contact me.
Right, and we're going to get you back on for an interview because you've got a very interesting past and backstory in property yourself.
Don't spoil it, just give us a wee teaser.
Yeah.
Yeah, suppose coming from a sort of sporting background into property, so it was it was a good journey, but always had that sort of basis of and an interest in property, which I think is essentially where I've ended up. after playing sport. So
yeah, so Marcus used to play for the Real Madrid of rugby, so look forward to hearing about that story in another episode. But thanks very much for taking the time to come on the Scottish Property Podcast. Interesting to get your views, opinions, what's going on in the Edinburgh market as well, so really much appreciated for your time, Marcus.
And I know you're going to call him out on his 5% prediction by the end of the year.
We'll need to save all these predictions. Every guest we get on, we should do a prediction and then save them all up and see who got it at the end of the, get a wee prize for the winner. Nice one.
No,
Thanks,
well, thanks very much,
a lot,
guys,
Marcus.
and thanks for having me on.